When I got back into town, I was not met with a lot of enthusiasm. The whole time I was gone, Lucy had to take care of my son. I forced her to be a parent, and for that, I was grateful. We ended up just trying to make life work for a while. The problem was, as soon as I got back, Gran was back to the same old, and so we couldn't really stay there anymore. On top of that, as soon as I got back into town, I parked the car at the house, and after 2 days of being home, the repo men came and got the car. Just like that, we were vehicleless again. Life was getting rough because of living with Gran without a vehicle. On a whim, we ended up going to a place that gave us housing assistance. They helped us get a little tiny house. Even though the house was small, we made it our home. It was just Lucy, my son, and I, and for that I was thankful. We had one room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. At this time, it was tax time, and we got a nice little chunk of change. I think it was like $1,800. We ended up getting the internet, and somehow Sprint gave us cell phones. We were also able to get a car, a Honda Accord. We bought the car on a whim because it looked good, but we were told that it would need struts soon, and when we were driving it, it would screech on both front sides. I figured that it wouldn't be anything to go and get some struts from a junkyard. I was wrong. This is a part that needed to be bought new, and I had found that out after I had purchased the vehicle. I couldn't afford to put new struts on it, and I really hated it after a couple of weeks. After a short period of time, Ralph started coming over to our new home. He had been staying with Gran, and Gran was getting worse with her dementia. Ralph was on the needle at this point in time. In fact, he had had an incident with an 18-year-old woman that was accusing him of shooting her up with bleach. He really is a terrible person, and this didn't surprise us at all. I personally know 5 women that Ralph shot up for the first time. One night, one of Lucy's friends needed a place to stay because she was fighting with her mom. Her name was Bernice. Bernice and Ralph had fell in love a while ago, and they were terrible for each other. After countless times of these two people getting into fights because Ralph would have sex with whoever he wanted, and she was possessive and crazy just like him, they finally realized that they were a train wreck together. They are both bipolar, and everything they did together was all bad. Her mother and stepdad had us meet them at a CVS to get Bernice. When they pulled up, they were actually really nasty towards Bernice. And so I stepped in and started cussing these people out, telling them, what kind of parent puts their child out in the middle of winter? And you guys are trash. Things along that line. I can't stand people that think they are better than anyone else. Those who hurt others when others obviously have problems. I told them that her daughter had problems because they had problems, and how could they ever expect their daughter to get better at life if they abandoned her at every moment just as she was getting back on her feet? I hate people like that. Nasty people. When we invited her over to stay with us, Lucy told her that Ralph was living in the basement of our house, and that if she and Ralph decided to mess around with each other, get intimate in any way, Bernice would not be able to live with us anymore. She said she wouldn't do anything with him and agreed to help us in any way that she could. I ended up giving her one of the cell phones that I had gotten at tax time because we were out of money, and she told us that she would help us by paying more than half of the bill. I was stoked about this because we really needed at least one phone. About a week after Bernice moved in, Lucy and I came home, and we couldn't find her. Lucy opened the basement door and said out loud, "I told you if you started having sex with my brother, you have to go, so it's time to go. Get out." At this, Lucy came back up the stairs and told me that when she walked downstairs, all she could see was her brother's pimply rear end and Bernice's rear as they were having sex doggy style. Now at this point, I decided to do something nice for this woman. I looked at Lucy and I said, "Slow down. I know that she messed up, but we both knew that this was going to happen. Let's give her one more chance." At this, Bernice came up the stairs very sadly. When she emerged from the basement, Lucy said to her, "Why would you do that? We gave you a place to stay for basically free, and all we ask is that you not do anything with my brother." Right then, Ralph emerged from the basement and said, "Don't be mad at her. I'm the one who talked her into it. Be mad at me." I then spoke up and said, "I knew this was going to happen. You guys can't do this here. This ain't that. But I told Lucy to give you one more chance. She said she didn't want to, but I talked her into it. So, do not do this again. You guys can't have a relationship of any sort. It doesn't work and we don't need the drama." She said okay, and that she promised she wouldn't have sex with Ralph anymore, and Ralph agreed as well. From that point on, they just hung out together. One day, shortly after this event, we ended up selling the Honda and buying a Saturn. It was better on gas and it didn't make that awful screeching sound. Ralph and Bernice wanted to go to Walmart a few days after we bought the Saturn, so we let them. An hour later, they both came flying up to the house, ran inside, and Ralph ran down into the basement. We asked what was going on, and Bernice told us that her and Ralph had just got caught stealing and that they had to run from the loss prevention people. We were like, what the heck? Did they see our car? They both said that they didn't know, but that they think they might have. Ralph said not to worry, that they probably wouldn't do anything about it. That same day, a police officer pulled up to our house. He came up to the door and asked if we had just had anything to do with a theft at Walmart. Bernice was sitting in the living room. Lucy and I told the cop that we had let her brother borrow the car for a little bit, but that he hadn't told us that anything fishy had happened while he was using it. The cop asked if Ralph was here, but we told him no, that he had dropped off the car and went out with some of his friends. The officer had a picture of Bernice from the store cameras, but it wasn't very good. He compared the picture to all three of us and then said that very matter-of-factly that we were good, that none of us was the culprit. He said not to let Ralph borrow the car anymore. We said that we wouldn't, and the officer took off. At this, I ran downstairs and called Ralph an idiot, but that everything was good and that he wasn't allowed to borrow the car anymore. He just laughed at us and came upstairs. Over the next couple of weeks, Bernice started becoming a pest. Lucy and I couldn't have sex like we wanted to, and we couldn't get Bernice to just leave for any period of time. We would even ask her to leave for a little bit. She would get this real bitter look on her face and would have a nasty attitude. The reason for this was because we wanted to have sex, but she couldn't have sex with Ralph, and so she was getting very salty. Finally, one day, out of nowhere, she said that she was going to go stay at her mom's for the weekend. She started packing the few things she had at the house, and Lucy told me that she had a feeling that Bernice was going to cut out and that we ought to get the phone from her before she left. I said okay, and then approached Bernice. I asked her if she was coming back, and she said yes, that she just needed a break from here. I said okay, and that we would see her soon. I told Lucy this, and she said, yeah, right, she ain't coming back. I said, I don't know. She said she was. She wasn't. A few days went by, and we started blowing up our phone and telling her that we were going to call the police if she didn't bring our phone back. I even remotely locked her phone through an app, but it didn't matter. She screwed us. We had to still pay the bill for that phone, and so we just let the phones lapse. I was so pissed. There was nothing we could do, and so we moved on. It was that time of the month again, and Gran had gotten her pills. She gave Lucy about 75 of them at this time, and we started popping them. I wanted to get higher than I had ever gotten off of pills, and so I would sneakily take 2 or 3 every 45 minutes or so, sometimes 5 at a time. I did this for almost 12 hours straight. Lucy was asleep during the night that I did this. She woke up and half of her pills were gone. But hey, I was higher than I had ever been. It was awesome. Shortly after this, Ralph decided to have some girl named Patty over to the house. Patty was Lucy's best friend Celeste's stepmother. He had brought her down to the basement and had shot her up for the first time. They had sex down there, and when they finally came upstairs, she looked ragged. She told us that she had to go, and off she went. 2 days later, Patty's husband came over to our house and started beating on our door. He was yelling, "Where are you at, you rapist? You shot my wife up with dope and had sex with my wife. I'm about to call the police on this house. All you sick people are going to prison. And you have kids in there? Come out, Ralph. I'll beat you to death with this baseball bat," which he had in his hand. Ralph was in the basement. I went down there and told him what was going on. He just said ignore him or tell him I'm not here. I decided to talk to this man. I opened the front door as he was starting to walk away. I told him that Ralph wasn't here. This wasn't his house and that he needed to get out of here or we were going to call the cops. He said, "Go ahead, you meth junkies." I told him that I didn't do meth and that this wasn't a meth house, that we had our son in the house and whatever he was talking about I had no idea about. He said that we would pay and started walking down the road. A couple of hours later, 2 police officers and CPS showed up at our house. Ralph was in the basement. The cop told us that they wanted to come into the house and search it, that they had gotten a tip that there was a meth lab in the basement. They asked if Ralph was down there, and we told them that he had not been there for a couple days. They said, "Can we search?" And though we could have said no, CPS was there, and we did not need any of this, so we let them search. They went down there, and we just knew that they were about to arrest Ralph. A few minutes later, the cops came back up with no Ralph in tow. They said that it looked like no one had stayed down there for a little while now. They said to not have him in the house anymore and that they would be watching for him. We told them that we wouldn't let him in at all, that we had no idea anything like what they were saying had happened. CPS decided to stick around and talk to us, to question us. We told the worker that we would cooperate in any way we could, that we were great parents and that we had had all kinds of problems with Ralph, but that we were not bad parents at all, that we were doing the very best as we could to take care of our son. The worker looked our son over, checked out our home, watched us interact with our son, and just generally paid close attention to things in our home to see if we were really good parents. After about an hour, the worker said that he was satisfied with everything and that he would close this case, that nothing more would come from this situation, and to keep Ralph away from the home. We told him that we would, and that we were too tired of all the drama that came with Ralph. We thanked him and watched him drive off. After this, I flew down into the basement and started looking for Ralph. He was hidden up in the dirt under the floorboards of the house, very well hidden. He had taken all of his dope supplies with him and made it look like he hadn't been there by hiding most of his stuff up in the dirt with him. It was crazy. Ralph was ready to leave and never come back at this point. He knew that the police were looking for him now, and so he packed everything up, waited until late at night, and took off. That was that. We were Ralph free. Well, at least free of him living with us. We got to have a couple of weeks drama-free finally, to enjoy the home that we had gotten because of our son. It was relaxing. Ralph had gotten a motel room and had met another woman during this time named Liv. They were getting along pretty well, and we liked Liv. She was a little Mexican woman that stood up to Ralph. Ralph wanted to start working. He didn't have an ID, and he needed one bad. He couldn't get one from the town we lived in because he couldn't get his birth certificate. But he said that if we went to Arkansas, he would be able to just run into the BMV there and pick up a new ID because Arkansas is a simple state to get anything done. He then asked if we could drive him to Arkansas. I was actually okay with this. I needed a vacation, and this would help get Ralph on the right track. He said that he would pay for the whole trip and that we would only be gone a couple of days. He wanted to visit his wife and kids and introduce us to some people. He also wanted to get some red phosphorus meth while there, and said that after he got a good big shot of that dope, that he was going to cut down on doing meth. Yeah, right, Ralph. Anyway, we ended up getting on the road the next morning. Liv wanted to come with us, and she had a little money to help with the trip. She also had 30 Vicodin 1000s. The trip there wasn't that long. It took us something like 8 hours with all the stops and such. The thing is that Ralph had cooked a couple of grams of dope before we left, and he had put the dope-filled coffee filters into a 20-ounce bottle of soda. Once they were in there, the soda became a super awesome mix of meth that, if you only took a sip of it, you would be high for hours. It was incredibly strong, and I know this because, at every instance that I could take a sip out of it, I did. I wanted to get high so badly on meth since I had last gotten high on it the year before, and I couldn't find it, nor could I tell Ralph to let me have some. I had to abstain from it, and it sucked. Now, though, I had the opportunity to get high, and I took it. No one had any idea that I was lit. We finally got to Arkansas, and Ralph was ready to meet his people. First thing, though, we went right to the BMV. I told everyone that I was going to sit in the car with my son. Lucy and Liv wanted to go with Ralph, and so they did. While they were gone, I sipped on the soda and touched my penis. It felt so great to be high again. I was so excited. I hoped that they were going to be in the BMV for a while, but they weren't. Just like Ralph said, he walked in and got his ID without any issue. After that, we went over to his family house. We started meeting his cousins and uncles and aunts. We went by some of his old stomping grounds, and it was cool. But all I really wanted to do was to get higher at this point. I ended up drinking most of the soda, but there was still a significant amount left when Ralph decided to clean out the car after taking a shot of the red phosphorus dope that he had gotten from a cousin of his. While we were at said cousin's, he had thrown the soda bottle on top of the trash can by the edge of the road, and I seen it. At the end of the night, I was lying on the couch with Lucy, waiting for her to fall asleep until she finally did. I was coming down badly, and I needed to get to that bottle. I ended up going outside to get it, but I was so paranoid that someone was going to see me grab it that for some reason I just stood at the corner of this house for 2 to 3 hours, right outside in the open. My body would not go forth and simply grab that bottle. I ended up going back inside and tried laying down, but I was higher than a kite still. There was no sleep. In the morning, Ralph was ready to get on the road again and get back to our state. He said his goodbyes and we jumped on the road. I let Ralph drive. Within an hour, Liv and Ralph were arguing. I was sitting right behind Ralph when out of nowhere, Ralph turns to Liv and smacks her right in the mouth. At that moment, I wanted to punch Ralph right in the side of the head. Everything in me was saying, just knock this dude out. It would have been so simple. Unfortunately, he had chosen to smack her wisely. If I would have knocked him out, we were going 70 miles an hour down the freeway, and my son was right next to me in the middle of the back seat. I could not afford to let anyone in that car get hurt. I decided to not do anything. Lucy and I just stared at each other. She knew what I wanted to do, but I knew that she knew why I didn't. No words were said at all by us during that time. We bit the bullet and listened to Ralph and Liv continue to argue. After about 20 minutes, they finally calmed down. It was a very stressful situation.